Si estás escuchando esto y no sabes inglés, no te vayas, esto te interesa. I basically told them you're interested in this conversation, put the subtitles on, and then keep going.
Buenas, soy Albert Portas, de Barcelona, tengo 24 años y llevo 4 años aquí en Estados Unidos.
Hola, soy Sebastián Trujillo, coach de golf de Colombia, y esto es
Más allá del deporte.
Well, one more episode of Más allá del deporte. Today we have a former student athlete. Like you know, we interview student athletes, international student athletes, so that they share with us their trajectory and how they happen to end up in the United States. This is not just any student athlete. He is the president of the University of New Haven and a good friend of us. So thank you, President, so much for coming and accepting this invitation.
Thrilled to be here. Thrilled to be here. We're going to go down memory lane.
Yes, indeed. So we have a few questions prepared for you. I'm going to let Albert take the first one and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, like the first question in our podcast, I always ask the same question, like, we want to know a little bit who is Jen Fredericksen?
Well, that's a loaded question. Who am I? So I guess I was born in Denmark, and then sort of lived a little bit all over. Grew up being consumed by sports, tennis, soccer, a variety of other things, and badminton very early. Might have been 8 years old, and then eventually, sort of the trajectory took me to the U.S. And certainly happy to describe how that came about. And otherwise, who am I? I'm somebody who I love what I do. I'm a big believer in the fact that you got to find something that really gets you excited.
Yes. Would you mind moving, like leaning forward or getting a little bit closer? So
Yeah.
that, because
the
we're
mic.
yeah.
Okay.
Take it from this way.
That is perfect. You can get
Look
you
at
can feel free to get a little bit closer
Yeah.
to the table.
Okay. I'm getting all sorts
There,
of
there,
directions.
That's
there.
good.
We're
Awesome.
happy with it.
I apologize for that.
No, are you kidding?
But we want to get the best views for our viewers.
Yep.
Sometimes we edit this out, sometimes not, because
Keep it in.
mistakes happen.
Yeah,
and we like
of
to
course.
be honest and truthful.
You wish you could edit all of life. You wish you could edit your athletic careers, but unfortunately, once the moment has passed, it's passed, right? So probably good to leave it in.
Yeah. As you said, you came here to the States. Yeah, we would like to know, like, how did it start, like this journey here in the States?
So I was, I guess, at some point, I was very early on in my life. I was one of those, whatever we call them these days, prodigies. So I played sort of world ranking junior events throughout, and unfortunately didn't take it quite as seriously as I should have. And then at some point, I did graduate high school and turned professional. So I played on tour for a couple of years. I actually lived in Spain, and when that didn't work out, which clearly more my fault than anything else, I was going to go to school in the UK and kind of give up on sports, and yet when it's been such a fundamental part of your life, and I got a call from a friend of mine who had played on tour as well. And he had heard that I was quitting the tour, and he said, well, have you looked at the United States? And I said, well, why would I look at the United States? And he said, well, it's incredible. I played tennis, and they fund all of it. I'm at this place called UCLA, which at the time didn't mean much to me. Wow. Again, we were so divorced in many ways from the American experience, and obviously the European experience is sort of university. The university experience is quite different, far more pragmatic, and at that point you've sort of already decided on your trajectory. You tend to go to school a little older. And so I started looking into it, and there was sort of a crazy roundabout way I knew to justify it primarily to my father. It had to be a school of a certain caliber, and so I got a hold of a Princeton review, and I went down the line. This is back when you still faxed stuff, and I faxed my tennis results, and the first school to call me back was actually Harvard, and I was like, great, I'm going to Harvard. And then it turned out that they don't actually give athletic scholarships. So I quickly discovered this Ivy thing, and then it was really down to three schools that kept calling me back, and it was Vanderbilt, Duke, and Berkeley, and it had the section in the Princeton Review that was shaded that said what's hot and what's not, and under Vanderbilt it said Greeks, and I was like, that's fantastic. They're a bunch of Europeans. And so I actually signed at Wimbledon. Ken Flack, who was at the time the head coach of Vanderbilt, who had been, I think, number one ranked player in the world in doubles, had played Davis Cup. I mean, really a pretty formidable guy. And so ended up on Vanderbilt's campus, never having seen it. And about a week in, I was looking for the Greeks, and somebody had to clarify to me that it was a very different. It wasn't a European contingent; it was a Greek life thing. So,
Did you get involved with Greek life
I
often?
did. I did not. Right. So I believe I might have been recruited by a couple of the organizations, but I mean, my experience was so different because I was 21 when I was I lived on my own
As a freshman.
as a freshman. I'd lived on my own for 3 or 4 years. I'd kind of seen the world. And so coming into a freshman dorm of students that were coming straight out of high school, I sort of very quickly became dorm parent, in charge of making sure that not everything runs off the trails. So,
Good.
yeah.
So at this point in life, at this point in time, what were your main priorities at the time of choosing a university?
Yep.
You said that you had a few that were calling you back,
Yep.
and you rapidly shifted towards the one that did offer athletic scholarship.
Well, so I think, again, my experience was a bit unique, obviously, insofar as I kind of been there and done that. Now, sports was a means to an end. The fact that I could continue to be a part of it when you've done something for 15, 16, 17 years of your life that's been all consuming, and the sacrifices that you've made. I think sometimes we struggle to translate the skills that have made you incredibly effective at, I mean, if it's a team sport, then you're a good team player. You know when your moment is to take responsibility and all these things, and passion and discipline. And as an individual athlete, you've developed a measure of self-reliance that's sort of very, very different than what your peers may have experienced. And so for me at that point, tennis was sort of, I mean, I really hit rock bottom in terms of I didn't make it. I didn't practice hard enough. I didn't make the necessary sacrifices. And so at some point you have to be honest with yourself, right, and look yourself in the mirror, and you got to have this moment where it's sort of fork in the road, right, where you can decide, was this all just sort of a bittersweet experience, or can you parlay it into something else? And maybe
Yeah. Something that we talked here about like a couple episodes ago is that some athletes, they keep like trying to be professional, to play professional, and there's a point that you need to be honest with yourself, as you said, and move on, because in life is not just like sports, or be a pro. Like at some point you have to realize that maybe, or you don't have the level, or you don't have the passion or the motivation, enough motivation to work hard, to practice every day, to get up at 8 a.m. So you need to be honest with yourself to move on in life.
8
And
a.m. 8 a.m. in Spain.
Bueno, here 6
5 a.m. in Colombia, 6 a.m. in
Yeah.
Colombia.
But that's very important, to be honest with yourself and move on, because look where you are right now. Like,
Well, it's a great point. I sort of often said, and have said it in sort of public forums, that whatever modicum of success I've had in life thereafter is predicated on an enormous failure. And it was an enormous failure to put myself on the line, right? It takes a lot of courage. It's always easy to say, if you don't succeed, oh, well, I was drinking, I was smoking, I wasn't practicing hard enough, right? All these things. That the hard thing in life is to put everything out there, everything that you've got, and then to accept failure, right? And that's a courageous task, and I didn't have that courage as an athlete, and so I survived on talent, which is a gift and a curse. Certainly happy to talk to that. But at that moment in my life, I sort of decided that nobody was ever going to outwork me again. and I became fanatic, right? Everything that I sort of had wasted. I mean, I went to college. I'm sure you know the story. I got through 7 degrees, something absurd, in the span of 8 years, which hadn't been done, won't be done unless somebody's just as crazy. And while being a student athlete for 2.5 years, had a terrible wrist injury. So it really didn't. I mean, Vanderbilt was very good. They sort of granted me a medical leave, but I mean, I was taking an obscure amount of hours, and really it was formative for me. I've failed plenty of times since, but I failed being everything that I could possibly be. And those failures are then in some ways harder and in a whole lot of ways easier because you never have to second guess, right? It just wasn't your moment.
Yeah, and I want to mention something because I'm very interested in what made you change your mentality and start like working hard, not focusing on the sports, maybe more on studies, getting your degrees, growing as a professional. When that mindset changed because something happened there, or so you met someone, you know what happened?
Yeah, I think about that moment often, right? Because I've lived an incredible life. It's not lost on me that I'm incredibly fortunate. I've gotten to experience some just outrageous things, and I wish I could point to an individual or a moment. Honestly, I mean, in retrospect, you always love those stories where you have that moment and you
Yeah,
bump
yeah,
into somebody. And for me, it was I really did. I was living in a hostel in southern part of Spain, and it really was sort of a rock bottom moment. It was not good, and it could have sort of gone two ways, right? There's always an easy way out. That's the nature of everything, right? You can always sort of figure the easy way out. I think maybe at core, I I was honest with myself. That I mean, I think there was sort of that moment of looking in the mirror and thinking, "Wow, I squandered. I had some incredible. Yeah, I was nominated for Davis Cup. I traveled the world. I had an incredible experience, m- but it yeah, it's sort of a weird thing to say. It was chance, but I felt like maybe deep inside, if I was honest with myself, I knew I had never put myself on the line, and maybe it was that time, and it wasn't easy at first, right? Because there's always off ramps. That's the hard part. I think understanding that even when I came to Vanderbilt, it was sort of, I mean, there were a million sort of off ramps, and you could have partied, and you could have
of
done this,
course.
that,
Yeah.
and the other. Those never go away. But this is going to sound ridiculous, but philosophically, Aristotle talks about the power of habits, and once you condition yourself with good habits, and they come day in and day out, at some point it's not something that you see as an act of self overcoming, or should I bow out, should I just not take this test, should I, and it becomes part of who you are. We have these weird divisions in life about, you see all these people go to work and they say, "Oh, I just want to get home. I'm such a better person at home," and they're funny, and yet you spend so much of your life doing that, unless you really are what you do, we say that division. I'm a big believer in who you are should be synonymous, should be reflected in your actions. And as an athlete, I wish I could give that lesson as a professional. Be about, I mean, this is going to sound again sort of like a platitude, but be about the business. If you're about the business, and you do the right thing when nobody is looking, it just becomes a habit, and eventually it becomes who you are, to where you're not constantly sort of, I mean, we have this sort of weird metaphor of angels and devils on shoulders, right? I think if you commit day in and day out, the habits eventually become part of who you are. And so second guessing it in a way it becomes a lot easier. Not second guessing it.
100%.
How that's great. That's great. And thank
Yeah.
you for that. How did you find a new north after acknowledging and being realistic that tennis was not going to work out?
Mhm.
Did that happen in Europe? Did that happen in the United States?
Yeah, I mean, I think it happened. I haven't given sort of a whole lot. I've given a lot of thought to that transitional moment. What was it, right? Because we all want that sort of epiphany like
Yeah, it's
moment. Was it a mentor?
a mentor or something.
I unfortunately had none of that. I was very good because serious people eventually stop taking unserious people seriously. That was a lot of serious, but you get what I'm saying. If you're just sort of phoning it in, eventually those that really do have the will sort of say enough. I've had enough of the excuse of it. So I didn't have anybody who really had my back at that moment. Um, my parents sort of lived a separate life, and there were some challenges there, and so when I came to the States, I think I realized very early on. I don't know what made me realize it, but the American university system is an extraordinary system, right? Insofar as you can have one-on-one interactions with people who written Nobel Prize. I mean, Vanderbilt was sort of it was like from a learning and opportunity and interaction perspective, you weren't a number, right? You didn't just walk in and see at some of the European institution where it's like you're number 113B and did
Yeah.
I pass the exam? Didn't I pass the exam? I think if you if you come in with a purpose, I think the American university system gives you a measure of exposure and appreciation, and you really are interacting with people who are thought leaders. Uh, and in some ways, it's maybe more comparable sort of to a boarding like school system that we would know in Europe, right? So that sort of degree of involvement and engagement. So I think early on I realized that all the possibilities were there. So now I could fall prey to the exact same logic of not taking advantage of anything that I had as an athlete, and instead kind of decide I'm going to take advantage of everything, which reflects this outrageous academic trajectory of 4 majors, 2 master's degrees, and a PhD, right? I mean, it was like I couldn't get enough. I was thinking, can I add another one in there? No, hell, right? I mean, so it became this sort of everything was there, and it was sort of for me to do with as I saw fit, and so I would say I realized the potential when I came to the US.
Yeah. So when you were studying, like getting your master's, everything, what was your goal in that time? Like you wanted to be like president of an
No.
university. What you wanted to do in that time?
It's a great question, and I get asked it actually. It's surprising because one of my sort of pet peeves has become in life that we live in a world that lots of people sort of calculate very deliberately. If I show up for this thing, it'll look good. That was never. I never went into this. I mean, I'm sure my father is. He's long passed away. If somebody had said to him, "Your son," my father was not an academic. My mother's not an academic, and so I mean that was nowhere on the trajectory, right? And certainly not for me either. I do speak a lot of languages, and I wish I could do this in Spanish. I can't. But
Yet.
yet, I appreciate it. But I grew up sort of around international finance, and so that in some ways. But I never. I mean, tennis was all consuming for me growing up, right? So it never. So as I was pursuing the degrees, I mean, it's sort of a weird thing to say nobody stumbles into a PhD, but if anybody did, it was sort of in some ways, I got obsessed with learning and more and more and more. And so at some point in my PhD trajectory, we had a faculty member at Vanderbilt who passed away, a wonderful individual who sort of helped my academic trajectory. And there was an opportunity where they needed to have somebody teach in the classroom. And so I got in the classroom very early at Vanderbilt, and I realized that I absolutely loved having an impact, right? I was teaching international politics, political philosophy, all these different things. And I think you learn things about yourself along the way. People will tell you, oh, you should be motivated by power, you should be motivated by money, you should be. And I think somewhere along the way, whether I fully understood it or not, I it's clear that I'm somebody who's motivated by impact. I have a strange relationship with money, strange relationship with power, impact and making a difference. And at core, I'm an idealist, right? I do believe that we can and should do better, and that should be the trajectory. And so as I got in the classroom, I mean, I was a university professor for a few years. Um, I also did other things because I clearly am interested in, right? So the classroom is very impactful because you have 20, 25, 50, 55, 100 students that you're trying to open their perspective and think about it in a way that contributes to brighter futures. But along the way, I was sort of exposed to how institutions work, and particularly I came in an administrative role in a struggling institution, and I'm somebody I like to fix. I see a problem, and problem has to be solved, right? Sort of frantically. So no, never thought I'd be college president. And again, I wish I could tell you that I had this very deliberate path, and it was all no.
That yeah, yes, 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 yes.
I got it.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about education.
Yeah.
We compare the education system in the United States, the education system in Europe, the education system in South America. What do you think makes the system unique in the United States compared to other continents and countries?
Well, I think in some ways what makes the US system unique is that it allows you to gain an incredible amount of perspective, the personalized component to in a world where the dynamics are increasingly complex and the speed of late modern life is so fast and you're constantly reorienting yourself to the moving tectonics. I think having an appreciation for a sort of broad portfolio of the university experience, but also being able to hone in on specifics, right? So I think that the interaction with being in a set of circumstances where everybody sort of shares the common purpose and the drive is sort of self-improvement and brighter futures and career opportunities and development collectively, I think creates a sort of magic level of innovation, drive, exposure that quite frankly, but again, I say this with the caveat that if you're coming without a purpose and you just sort of say, oh, this is cool, I'm going to sit and play computer games.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with computer games, but it's sort of the ability of you to drive into it and take advantage of it. I think that's where, and I think actually athletes in some ways should appreciate that proposition, right? Because it's part of the drive of saying, oh, I can make the most of this, right? And there's really no ceiling on what you can make of it. You can be involved in sort of national research projects. You can be doing internships while learning sort of the firsthand. That sort of flexibility and that comprehensiveness of it, I think is hard to replicate. But you have to come at it with a sense of, like anything else, with a sense of urgency and purpose.
Yeah, like as we always said that America, if you want something, you can get it. In Europe sometimes you want things to do things like you want to like create your business, whatever. It's harder. Here, if you really want something, there's a lot of facilities and like a lot of people that's gonna help you. That's the difference for me. The main difference between Europe and USA. That here it's much easier, everything. Like if you really want it,
Yeah.
of course, and,
Yes.
and if you work hard, of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about your student athlete experience specifically.
Yeah.
What are the best memories that you have from this period in time?
So it's interesting, right? Because tennis obviously isn't a team sport, and you probably know I actually played soccer at a pretty high level, so I got to sort of experience both things growing up. I got to experience the intense pressure as a child, and again, wouldn't wish this on my own kids, which is sort of interesting. The responsibility, the pressure of being the kid, of being the one seed, and really at the age of 12, you're being told you can't lose, and unless you blow everyone away, it's kind of like blah, right? And so I remember that pressure being absolutely suffocating. And then coming to a college sport where you do compete as a team, having known it's still different than what I knew from soccer because you genuinely were a team, right? You actually, I mean, you can perform your role well or not well, but collectively there's still sort of more of a unit there. College tennis, in a weird way, right, it combines a bunch of individual athletes and then says, "Go Doors" or "Go whoever," right? I think I look very fondly upon the ability of a group of players to come together, and we had some wonderful experiences, right, where we won against institutions that we weren't at the time. We were sort of an up and coming program that all of a sudden then became very, very, very good. So that was a fun experience, sort of seeing how. I mean, from a practice perspective, it's always easier when you're surrounded by people who sort of cheer you on, right? I mean, again, being an individual athlete, you're sort of used to putting in endless amount of hours conditioning on your own, and now you're surrounded by 8 other guys who are doing the same thing. So I think that collectivity, that sort of purpose, I just think my experience, because I'd already played and tennis was now a means to an end, I actually didn't get to enjoy it. And if I sort of could look back, I think coming straight out and going into that environment and really building that bond and that being your and we had a couple of guys from that team who turned pro afterwards and did very, very well. A guy named Bobby Reynolds who made sort of top 100 ATP and had a formidable career. I think that was a more natural trajectory. So mine was sort of strangely disjointed by the fact that
You played before
Yep,
and
yep.
stuff. Yeah. But yeah, like as he said here, tennis is not that individual. It's like a collective sport
Yeah.
because I think you feel supported for all the players that play in your team. Then if you win, you go out together, you do things together. I think it's a great experience for tennis players because tennis is a very mental sport. I think the toughest one.
I think
No,
it's
what do you think?
Oh, I used to say I think tennis is underratedly the toughest one because it's sort of it's somewhere wedged between chess and boxing, right? I mean, you don't actually physically hurt somebody, but there is a degree of physicality to it when people are hitting serves at 130 miles an hour, right? I mean, so the physicality of it is outrageous, but then there's also the whole head to head.
No, yeah,
It is a very, very tough.
yeah, boxing.
I have a question for you. What 2 skills or 3 skills do you attribute your success to?
Work ethic, above all else. I referenced talent earlier. I bumped into somebody in an airport 6, 7 years ago who I had played on tour with. And I was consistent with who I was then, sort of flippant and, oh, he doesn't have enough talent. He can't do this with the ball. He can't. And we would play practice sets all the time, best of 5. And I used to sort of think, oh, poor thing, like he tries really hard and he's just never going to learn feel and all these other things. And we'd finish practice and I'd go drink a couple of beers and smoke cigarettes and he would keep practicing. And again, I was sort of like, oh, hopeless.
Okay.
I mean, the guy turned into a top 5 ATP player, and I won't name his name, but he beat Roger, he beat Rafa, he became a pretty big deal. And again, so when we bumped into the airport, I was like, "Hey there!" Again, I'm sparing the name, and he was like, "What happened to you?" And at the time, I was a university professor or administrator, whatever I was, and I was like, and it was this sort of incredibly strange moment of past meets present. So I use that example to say here was somebody with relentless dedication and purpose. Again, talent is a wonderful. I mean, you look at a Roger Federer who combines everything, and people are like, "Oh, he's so incredibly talented," or a Messi, or whoever you want to look at. What what really people sort of overlook is the kind of effort. I mean, I think Roger gave a speech at maybe at Dartmouth, a commencement speech. It's really a brilliant speech, right? It not only talks to just how small the margins are, but the amount of work and repetition that goes into it. So I would say work ethic, determination, and resilience.
Yeah. So it's a little bit interesting because like you had those strengths, you have those now, but you said that like as a tennis player you were so talented. You were like
Yeah.
one of the best in the moment when you were young. And you didn't have that work ethic, that motivation. That's why I'm a little bit confused because something had to happen in your mind that to change that mentality and say, look, I have to start like working hard, uh, going for my goals, like as your friend did, that he didn't have the talent, but he was working hard, so he got that. So, um, you don't have any moment like change that because you changed the,
he
you
keeps
know?
trying to find a.
I know
No, because,
that one kid.
no,
No,
because you know what I mean?
it is an incredibly unusual story. So what I will say is maybe so there was this test that they used to run in the German Tennis Federation when you were young. It's called the Cooper Run. And it was how far can you run in 12 minutes? And you were measured against all other athletes from every other sport. And I ran it the first time maybe when I was 11 or 12. I could still tell you how far I ran because I have reasonably good memory. I ran 3,200 and some odd meters. And I stopped the run and I threw up for 20 minutes and I was sick for 3 days and my wife will tell you this today. I have the enzyme that when I go, I go. So maybe that's actually innately who I am. But then it was covered over by years of easy off ramps, attention from
Girls, yeah.
parties
Yeah.
and coaches and whatever else, right? So in some ways, maybe it was more of a return to the little kid who ran until he lost it, right? Because I remember at the time, everybody was sort of having this running joke about the kid who threw up, right? And who pushed himself to that point. I'm still, my wife will confirm, I'm still that person. The problem is I can't go work out, right? Because unless somebody puts a stop, I won't be in for work for 3 more days, right? So maybe I hadn't thought about it this way before, but maybe it was innately actually closer to who I am. Then I got caught because we all know kids who get told they have talent. Oh my God, you make it look so easy. Oh, you did this. Praise comes very easy. And I think maybe that for so many years covered over
Who you really were.
who I really was. So maybe that's the way. So in some ways, it's a return to.
That's super.
Very beginning. Interesting.
That's super nice. Yeah.
Your kids are athletes as well. They're
Yes.
young athletes, and they have been part of Albert's P4SA soccer
Yeah,
camp.
they came. Yeah.
Do you wish for them to be college athletes one day?
I do, with the caveat that I think athletics is an extraordinary thing. You get to participate for moments in time. You share a common purpose that's joyous, that's intense. In a world where we're constantly sort of pitted in scenarios and there's a lot of turmoil, I think having something like a beautiful game, and it is a beautiful game, even sort of not knowing things about certain sports, I can acknowledge the passion and the joy of others in it. I mean, the ones that I'm sort of most near dear into my heart, so tennis, soccer. I mean, I can,
Yeah.
and so I want them to have that experience. Ideally, so I used to say I don't actually care if what level they reach, and I recently came to a conclusion that I do actually, if I'm honest with myself, I do care, because there is something about really excelling at something, right? You can just say, oh, I go out there and have fun. Oh man, I have fun playing a computer game too. I have fun, right, playing with slime. I have fun, whatever it is that they have fun with. But there is something about caring to be better, and all the life lessons that are embedded in that. Like, I take responsibility. So we had this conversation, right, when my son played in a game, and he is very talented, but personality wise, he's very different than I am, right? So he'll make a nice move, and then he'll kind of let everybody else play.
Yeah.
And I kind of took him aside, and they were leading in a game, and then they all just try not to get the ball. They just kicked it out of bounds, and it was clear that they were just trying to run down time.
Mhm.
And I said to him afterwards, I said, this is so indicative of life. Like, take responsibility. So I guess if I'm really honest with myself, I do care, but I care not because, I mean, for them bringing home a trophy is like they won the World Cup, right? And it's wonderful. But I really do care because I think there are lessons embedded in there. Fairness, sportsmanship, courage, responsibility, resilience, all those things that if you want to be subbed out when the tide starts turning, that's not how life goes, right? We began this by sort of talking about malfunctions and editing. You don't get to edit. You get to do better the next time around, but that's the best you can hope for, right? So, but if you're not willing to say, hey, I'll step in. If we lose, we lose. But I'm going to take responsibility. That's no different than what you'll face in life. I mean, life is there's that famous, one of my favorite quotes. It's a Chekhov quote where, right, any idiot can face a crisis. It's the day to day living that gets you, right. And day to day living is very much like what happens in a sports. Obstacles are thrown at you. There's so many ways. So, all long-winded answer to say, I would like them to, what that amounts to, but I would like them to excel.
Yeah. Uh, as he said, like for me, sport is the reflection of life.
Yep.
It's the reflection of life. Like if you play a sport and you compete, you want to be better every day. It's gonna help you to realize how the life works. So it's like it's learning when you are a kid. If you play a sport, you can tell who played a sport in a good level, who took it serious. You can tell when you meet someone. So for me, for the kids, if I have kids in the future, I want them to play, and I'm gonna tell them, hey, you have to compete. You have to be the best in the field. Maybe you are not the best, but in your mind, you need to try to be the best, because in life it's gonna help you that, and I met his sons, like your son and daughter, and they are really different. Your daughter is like super spontaneous, a lot of energy, and your son, he has talent, like he's lefty footer, that it's very important, that makes a difference in soccer, but he's a little bit shy. But I think it's something that can work,
Yeah.
like with playing.
I
So,
agree with
yeah.
you. I mean, there's so much value into playing sports at an early age that they learn how to cope with failure. They learn how, like you say, put everything on the line, and if it works out, and truly enjoy what it means to do something by yourself, and if it doesn't, really know how to bounce back and do it again.
Yep.
There's so much value to that it reflects on life as well.
And there is a beauty. This is going to sound sort of, but so when I quit playing, I would teach tennis, and it was sort of a very cathartic thing for me because I got a hand off. I had some of the top U.S. nationally ranked juniors. A couple of them ended up sort of at top SEC schools. They were incredible, but I kind of got to hand it off. And in the process of handing it off, I met a young man who's been wildly successful financially, and but he was obsessed with tennis. But he started later in life, and I mean, he would try so hard, and all he wanted, it, no independent financial success, all this thing, all he wanted was to be able to hit one ball the way that he had seen somebody of my
Yeah.
level hit the ball. And it's never going to happen. Like no matter how hard he tries, same as when you see people who golf, who picked it up late, who are obsessed, but the ball just doesn't quite compress. And at that moment in time, it struck me that there is something incredibly beautiful, and there are few things in life where so many micro instances went into being able to do something at a level where you're just like, I mean, same with concert piano, right? But what it took to get to that moment that we then take for granted, even, I mean, floating a soccer ball over, however, landing it on there's something like, there's few things in life where you really just, and you forget about it because it's second nature to you until somebody from the outside room, like, show me how to do this. And you kind of want to say, it's never going to happen, right? So,
No, you're right. You're right. I have experienced it on both ends.
yeah.
Obviously, with the golf, where it comes naturally to me to just hit the golf ball, compress it, and fly however I would like. But then on the other side, I had the opportunity to play pickup soccer with Albert once, and he bothers me. He tells me that I have two sticks on my legs. I am more coordinated with my hands than with my legs. He scored a goal so there was this tiny goal, right, and there was a goalkeeper. We were not using the hands, just the bodies and the legs, but it's a small goal. He chips it over the head of the guy. The guy jumps, the ball just barely makes it over. It goes into the top right corner, and everybody's like amazed, and Albert's like, I mean, I played in La Masia, I played in
That's the
Barcelona.
moment, right?
I
That's
played
the
in
moment.
Barcelona.
Yeah.
It's so cool. Talking about your kids,
Yeah.
what have you learned from them?
I've learn from them. I mean, again, you always sort of, I mean, hindsight's 2020, right? And then you also reflect on your own experiences through today's eyes. And so what I remember from my childhood is that tennis was as much a burden as it was a joy, and probably to some degree more of a burden than a joy. That's me sort of retrospectively editing that. I wish I could go back to that child and say, have fun, try harder, don't let all these external pressures. Seeing the joy in my kids' eyes, but also the complications, you feel a little helpless, right? Because I certainly, I talk to my kids way more, and you reference my daughter. My daughter's remarkable, right? Because she just goes, and it doesn't matter. I mean, there's no such thing as like shame or like concern about it. No, in her world, she's the star, and this is going swimmingly, right? And I I'm so grateful for that, and it's so much fun to watch. And with my son, I try to talk him through the complexities. I've learned that I wasn't as unique as I thought I was in terms of the like as an adult, I used to think, oh, all other kids just loved sports and they couldn't wait to go, and everything was uncomplicated. Everybody was having fun. Everybody was succeeding. Seeing it in my own kids, in some ways, particularly in my son, I've seen complexity that resonates with me as an adult of how I saw myself as a kid, and so I would say that they in some ways have helped remind me that nothing is that simple. For my daughter, it seems to be, but that can change on a dime, right? But even going to some of these games and seeing other kids struggle and hearing some of the commentary around, oh, right, the parents are not happy with this, and you didn't do this, and it's given me an appreciation for where I felt like my experience was so lonely. I think it is incumbent upon us to talk to kids very early about both the incredible lessons, but also the complexities of it, and the path that that puts you on.
I feel so reflected with his history, and I think you the same, because I feel that you didn't have success because for you wasn't
He
like a
did.
show.
He did have success.
No, but in tennis, he didn't play professional tennis
Yep.
because for you, you didn't enjoy playing tennis. It was like more a pressure,
Yep.
a burden, as you said. And for me, I felt the same with soccer.
Yep.
I felt the same. I had a lot of talent. I played in the best teams in Spain, in Barcelona, but I didn't enjoy. I wanted to quit. I said, like my life is not like a balance. It's like one day I'm like here and one day I'm in the bottom. I don't want to have that life, and that's why I didn't keep like trying and practicing. I said, look, I have to be honest. I need to find like a balance in my life and try to do things that you know, yeah, be able to be balanced in life. So I think that that happened with a lot of athletes that have a lot of talent, but the sport becomes a burden.
Yep.
A burden.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, totally. Continuing down this lane, what advice do you have for young athletes and their parents that maybe dream of making it to a college level or a professional level? Obviously, you just said have fun, but what would you tell them if you could speak to them directly?
I would say focus on the process. This is where I think, and your point is very well taken. I think if you experience results too early on, whether you want to or not, people can say, "Oh, you played a good match." You don't really care so long as you didn't win, right? And didn't. I think understanding the trajectory is long. That it's as a child, every moment that you put yourself on the line and get better, it's like a puzzle piece. It adds up. Now, where ultimately that puzzle ends, who knows? Lots of different factors. Life is too hard to predict. But I would say think about it as a puzzle that every time, and not from a results perspective, nobody's gonna, I mean, ironically I say this and I remember every result from when I was 8 or 9, but that's just my sort of my fanatic mind because I was so result obsessed. um you won't remember, I've said this to my son, perspective is everything, right? So you're not going to remember if you missed a wide open chance at some game in Guildford or Brantford when you were 9 years old and the pitch looked like an earthquake and it was hammering down rain. It's irrelevant. It's how you put yourself out there and every day approaching it with joy, with a series of things that you want to get better at, and learning how to be courageous, taking responsibility. Focus on those instead of sort of the, uh, did we beat this team? Was I the best player on the field?
Oh, I didn't score. I missed this chance. All these things.
Yep.
So,
Wow.
so
Yeah, 100%.
Thank you.
And that's something that my parents didn't teach me.
Nope.
They always were, and my family they was telling me, why you didn't score, why you missed that pass,
You could have made this. You
Yeah.
could have made that pass. You should have taken a better
and the
decision
parents,
here.
they want the best for you, but sometimes the advices are not the best, you
Yep.
know. So
And I would sort of say along those very lines, it dictates how you progress. So when I had that many early results, I became a player that I could outmaneuver others. I didn't play to get better. I played to win,
Mm.
which is a weird thing to. But what that meant was I could just play safe, and I know eventually I could outlast them. But at some point, all of a sudden, you've conditioned yourself to just be so defensive, or I think in every sport, if you're too beholden to the instant false gratification of whatever, I got a trophy or I scored a goal, short circuits what over time actually is the long-term trajectory.
Wow.
100%.
Whoever heard that, pause, go back and listen to that again. That's incredible.
No, it's super real. Yeah,
We're gonna dive into this closing section
yeah.
of our podcast. So we have a few rapid fire questions ready for you.
Please.
You're just gonna share with us whatever comes to your mind,
Yep.
whatever comes first nature to you.
Yep.
What's your go-to coffee order?
Black.
If you could teach any course at this university, what would it be?
Global awareness and understanding.
What's the best piece of advice you have ever received?
I know this is supposed to be rapid fire. Best piece of advice. Be consistent with what you do.
If you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would it be?
Oh, that's a good one. Historical figure. Oh, wow. You really threw me for a loop there.
Take your time.
Take my time. Who would I want? Maybe. So many. There's so
Feel free to explain why as well.
yeah. Who do I feel like sort of changed the trajectory of? I mean, the problem is there's so many, right? Whether you look at a Christ or you look at Gandhi or people whose impact was lasting, right? And who captured, but in some ways who captured a moment in time. Even that's not quite right. So I don't know that may be maybe a flaw. Maybe let's just say I'd love to have dinner with Socrates. How about that?
Wow.
Socrates,
Fair.
Not the soccer player.
No.
soccer player.
Greek. Are you an early bird or a night owl?
Oh, I was a fanatic night owl throughout my formative years. I would still say I'm a night owl, but I've had to learn to get up early.
If you were not a university president, what would you be doing?
See, I ask myself that sometimes. Honestly, I absolutely love what I do. It's hard for me. I mean, I could say I'd love to play tennis, but I don't have I don't have that melancholy that I once did. I come into work every day. I love what I get to do. I love this place.
What's the favorite book you have read?
Oh, that's another good one. Favorite book I've ever read. It's gonna be weird. I sort of had I mean, I think there's incredible works written in political philosophy, from The Social Contract, Rousseau's Social Contract, Hobbes's Leviathan. I mean, those are sort of the masterpieces of thought. Literarily, I would say that there was a Russian novelist named Dostoevsky. Crime and Punishment, I think, is an extraordinary work on sort of the internal of the psyche. And but yeah, no, I gravitate towards sort of texts that people reflect on the times in which they live and hopefully chart a path forward that's better.
So
Awesome.
if you can recommend like just one book for us, for
Just
like young
Yes,
kids.
recommend a book to
Yeah,
me.
for us.
um a book that
That's gonna help us like to be more successful in life.
that's going to be more successful in life. That is a good question. A book that I remember reading. There was a book called Jonathan Livingston Seagull, which sort of very short little book about sort of pursuing your dreams and standing out. It's metaphorical, but it's
Okay,
yeah,
we'll take a look.
yeah,
Take a
uh,
note
Yeah.
yeah.
for sure. What is one thing that you're always carrying with you?
Um, I always wear my watch.
If you had an unlimited budget,
Yeah.
what would you do for the university?
I would make sure that we recruit the largest possible student body for whom cost and affordability are prohibitive, and that way, if I had sort of unlimited resources, I would. I think it's important for students to put an investment in themselves, but I wouldn't want anybody not able to pursue college degrees. So I mean, we'd have whatever 50,000 undergrads with unlimited resource. We have to build some buildings, but yeah, no, with unlimited resources, that's what I would do.
What is something really unexpected that you bumped into as a university president?
Um, that's a trick question because again, my wife can confirm this. I'm one of those people. I'm very rarely surprised. I spend so much time in my head that I tried. There's that game on the Price is Right. I think it's called, right, with Plinko, where if you pluck it
Oh
in,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it can only land on one of 8 options. So I spend so much time in my head that very few things sort of end up surprising me. Maybe maybe I mean, I thought this university had extraordinary potential, and maybe I'm still surprised by the kind of potential we have here.
What is your favorite way to unwind after a busy day?
Uh, I don't do much unwinding. Again, my wife can confirm I'm notoriously bad at unwinding. Uh, I, 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 I guess I enjoy hearing from my kids about their day because the perspective is so it takes me out of my head, right? In a way, when you have adult conversations, you right away default to what happens at work. But when we got to build tents and do s'mores today in class, that was the theme yesterday. It's like it does sort of take you out of your rut or whatever it is that you're in with the problems that consume you.
If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Right here.
Do you prefer a quiet office or one with lots of action?
Um, Relentless action.
If you could choose instantly to learn any language, which one would you choose?
Uh, Maybe Arabic or Chinese.
What is the most rewarding part of being a president at the University of New Haven?
Getting to do stuff like this. No, I mean, think it's interesting because I see a lot more students than I think most presidents do, and both of my assistants, it drives everybody crazy, right? That the office is like this revolving door, and we got all these big things and small things and everything's. Um, I think if you lose touch with why you're doing this, I mean, there's a million things you could go do, right? But having whatever small role that I have in impacting futures and opportunities for students is what gets me excited, right? And we all do. Everybody who works at this university shares that common purpose. But if I ever feel like I'm too far out of touch with that, then it isn't what I should be doing. And so my favorite part is when students come in and and they excelled at something, or they got a job, or they did something great that maybe in some very small way I contributed to.
That's awesome. Who is somebody that you have always looked up to?
See, that's an interesting one, because we mentioned earlier sort of the mentor. I Again, I had a couple of great coaches when I was very young, but my life is so fractured that I don't have strong family. My father passed away, and it wasn't a straightforward relationship. My mother's still living, but my mother's not that well. Um, I met somebody when I came to the US, who lives in Atlanta, who had been very successful, and far more importantly is just, you come across people who are decent human beings who do the right thing when nobody is looking. Uh, I hope to be that, and he is somebody who I know for a fact that is that, and so that I've never. I had role models when I was a kid, right? You looked at Ed Berg and Wielander and great tennis players. Same on the soccer field, Michael Laudrup.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I have not been blessed outside of a few great individuals here and there who've been helpful. But there hasn't been sort of a constant, and I still, in a weird way, right? I say this, I'm now, however old I am, getting old. I think I missed out on that. I would love to be able to point to somebody who I look at and think, hmm. But human beings are complex. We all are, right? And it's I think it's wonderful to have role models, but yeah, no, I mm, didn't have sort of the one figure through. You hear from people, oh, this, but, and that's wonderful. And maybe I'm a bit jealous that I didn't have that to quite that extent.
If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Uh, The ability to solve the largest problems on a global scale.
It's outstanding. What is the last thing that made you laugh out loud?
Uh, they showed me something yesterday on social media. I played volleyball, and and you have an image of yourself doing it, and then seeing it firsthand.
It's
I did
different.
I did laugh out loud. I don't think I had
I
any.
saw it. I saw it.
Yeah. So you know why.
Jens,
I have one last question,
okay.
okay? Because I want to mention that being international and becoming the president of an university of the United States, it's something incredible. Incredible. Like I see myself as an international, and I cannot see myself like doing something like that now. Okay. And I think that the process, behind the process, there's a lot of work, a lot of work ethic, as he said. And it's not just that he's the president, it's that he created a family here, he built a family, he has a family, he has a stable life. So I think it's we can learn a lot of things from him, especially the international guys that we want to be successful in America, because you are the clear example that
It's possible.
being international, you can be very successful in the States. So yeah, like that's.
I'll dive in and ask you a question.
Yeah.
What is your tailored advice to the international student populations, understanding all the intricacies that it entails?
I would say come in. Thank you for saying that. It's awfully kind. Um, I would say come in with a purpose. You're handed an opportunity, but it's what you do with it. Don't read into visa this or that. And I'm not American. I've never. I have to say I don't feel particularly attached to any country. I left Denmark when I was young. I lived in Luxembourg. I lived in Germany. I lived in Spain. In some ways, that was a good thing, because I tend not to look at places as if they are stacked against me. I look at what the place presents from an opportunity perspective, and then it's my job to make the most out of it. And I do think you mentioned this earlier, and I think that is a sound observation, that the United States does set up for people who are motivated and innovative and driven to be highly successful, international or not. And again, we read about all this, and I try not to let that stifle me. Human beings are human beings. The same qualities are transcended. People want to be around people who are about the business, who are courageous, who say what they're going to do, who are loyal, who do things the right way when nobody's looking, who integrity matters. Like that to me are transcendent human qualities. And I know we hear these things. I think what you're handed here is an opportunity to really put those in play and then just never look back, keep going. And then independent of what walk of life, I know sometimes there's challenges stacked against along the way. But for international students, I would say this is your opportunity to shine, and it served me very well.
Thank you so
Well,
much.
that being said, Jens, thank you so much for all the advice and the guidance.
No,
As
pleasure.
always.
It was
I
a pleasure.
I love being here. I was uniquely bad at the rapid fire thing. I have to get.
It wasn't rapid. It wasn't rapid.
I know the rapid, very rapidly slowing down fire. Yeah.
That's how we like it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much again.
No, such a
Guys,
pleasure.
stay tuned for the next episode. Thank you so much.